Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Neil McLean, co-founder and CEO at Navattic. The topic of today's episode is the state of the product demo. So PreSales Collective and Navattic partnered to run a survey and report on the state of the product demo. So in today's episode, Neil and I are going to discuss some of our findings and how it applies to the pre-sales profession and today's buying trends. So if you haven't checked out this report, please check the show notes. You'll be able to see the URL or go to navattic.com/resources and you'll be able to see the state of product demo report. Enjoy today's episode. Neil, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you?
Doing well, James. Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on here. You know, I've had the privilege of getting to know you, Randy, and the Navattic team and seeing your growth over the past year and a half. And so it's great to actually have you on the podcast and put our conversation recorded out there for the pre-sales community.
Likewise, it's been great to build with you all and cool to see the progress of PSC. I remember when it was essentially you and Yuji running things a little while ago. Excited to see that grow and excited to build Navattic in parallel.
Absolutely. And actually on that, we were chatting before we started recording. It's just been kind of wild that both of us and both of our companies in different ways have been really riding this pre-sales wave and this momentum. And you guys are a 10-person company at this point now. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's really been interesting to see the pre-sales to go from this kind of profession in the corner to now being a forefront of the technical sales movement and really the go-to-market motion today. So exciting to see that change and help enable that as well.
I like that you call it the technical sales movement. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do here. And it's great to see companies like Navattic that are building purpose-built solutions for this persona as well. It's amazing to see what's happening in this pre-sales ecosystem. But Neil, before we get into today's topic, you have a pre-sales background as well. So why don't you tell us your pre-sales journey?
So after school, I joined Oracle's Class of program as a sales engineer, solution engineer. And my charter there was to deliver demos. I did a lot of sales-led demos. I ran trials, navigated POCs across Oracle's infrastructure and SaaS divisions. Really the span of products, but it got me broad exposure into the core tenets of an SE. And really it was exciting and eye-opening to be that technical component in that sales process. And that's really where Navattic was born. In the trenches, working with AEs, delivering demos, and presenting it is where we got the idea and ultimately ended up founding Navattic based on some of the challenges that we saw in the space.
What was the moment that you were like, I need to go start my own company and go do this?
Well, it was funny. I remember back ways ago, you would search pre-sales tools on Google and nothing would show up. There's a lot of tools available for AEs, sellers, and other frontline folks. But for pre-sales engineers and around the demo, there was really no tools available to help templatize, organize, and share what was essentially the most important part of the sales process. So that really got our wheels turning around. How can we enable teams to own, control, and share their demo? And that was the impetus for Navattic and what we built today.
That's incredible. And when did you start and found Navattic?
So that was in 2020, fall of 2020 is when we started and founded it. And today, of course, we've since grown from that.
Neil, I love that story. And it's great to see the growth of the Navattic team as well. I love talking to pre-sales professionals who say, hey, I've seen a problem and I want to go and fix it and creating a product for it. I think we're starting to see that more and more, which is incredible. Getting into the topic of today's episode, the state of product demos. This is a really interesting one, Neil, because behind the scenes, we had been talking about running a survey and doing a report over the last couple of months on the state of the product demo. You know, what's so interesting for me and why we wanted to do something with Navattic on this topic was that I think years ago, this role was just looked at demo. And as sales and buying is changing, the role of the pre-sales professional is changing, co-selling, co-pilot, being more than just sales support. And the role is actually expanding way more than just demo. I feel like I talk about this all the time, but mixing this B2C consumer behavior that's bleeding into B2B. And you have this magic happening right now around the demo. And what was the focal point is probably not the focal point anymore. And there's new ways for buyers and sellers to be providing value to each other in the process. So let's talk about product demos and let's get into this report. Sound good?
Let's do it.
I always like to start with why. Why did you create this report?
In the last 2 years, sort of like you're mentioning, James, we've noticed a tremendous shift in how buyers are expecting to evaluate and purchase software. We were curious if these changes have cascaded into the pre-sales motion and wanted to see, what are the metrics and stats into how companies across the life cycle of the many SaaS companies out there are delivering these demos. And we looked around, we couldn't really find any reports that answered questions like, what is the estimated lag time between a demo request and an actual demo? How long are these sales-led demos? And are most companies sales-led or product-led or a mix between the two? So we really didn't have any great answers to these questions and figured there was no better way to figure that out than to ask. So it was great to see over 150 pre-sales and sales professionals get their input on the demo, and excited to share these findings with the pre-sales community.
I appreciate that background and perspective on why that you started this. As a pre-sales professional myself, I love to extract some of the data. And one of the things that I just want to start with is how long it takes most sales teams to respond to a demo request. There's a lot of debate right now on what that call to action button should be on a website. Is it talk to sales? Is it a demo request? Is it a free trial, product-led perspective? The data shows that it takes 3 days to a week at least to respond to a demo request. So I'm curious why you think that is.
I think there's a few reasons there, but one of the things that we've seen is that, to your point, 75% of teams take around 3+ days to respond, and that jumps up to 85% if you're in an enterprise company. So what we've seen is, because that time is so long, buyers are frustrated. And there's some tooling that you can do to help mitigate that. So like tools like Chili Piper or maybe a Calendly scheduling can mitigate some of the friction associated with routing internal requests. But at the end of the day, this is becoming a huge friction point for buyers, because when you sign up to request a demo, oftentimes you're waiting a few days and you don't even get to see the demo. You're on a discovery call with an AE or maybe an SDR. So there's a huge friction that happens, and really the buyer relationship is frustrated with that deceiving call to action. So what we're seeing now is a push towards more transparent buying processes where you have a talk to sales call to action or a get in touch call to action that reflects what's actually going to happen once you hit that button and then get in touch with their team.
I like that. I mean, you just said deceiving call to action, because that is the truth. And I reflect back on some of my previous experience. Not only did it take forever for a BDR to do a disco, as then the AE did a disco, and then you got a solutions consultant to get on and do a demo. You're talking like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks since you clicked that button. I mean, that's crazy nowadays.
It is. And you have other folks that have product-led approaches that can easily take you into the product within minutes. So you look at like what companies are going to succeed in tomorrow's world of sales and growth, and it's those that have that frictionless buying and product experience.
It's a good point. And I've quoted Sean Whiteley at least 100 times since he joined us on the Pre-Sales Leadership Symposium in the summer of 2021, where he talked about Uber and Amazon have changed the concept of speed and personalization for all of us. And whether we want to admit that this bleeds into our B2B behaviors, it does. When we call an Uber, if it says that it's going to take 25 minutes to pick you up, you cancel it and you go check Lyft. That's literally what everybody does. That's changed the speed concept of expectation. Some of the things you brought up there, this funny thing, Neil, that I don't really talk about, but because I'm a co-founder of PreSales Collective, I have a lot of friends that are in sales. And so a lot of my friends that are in sales now like to call me and complain about some of their pre-sales processes in their organization. And I do know some enterprise companies that when you request a solutions consultant or a solutions engineer, it takes over 2 weeks to get them on a schedule. And some of the AEs I talked to are like, this is crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, my buyer is ready to progress the conversations, but you're telling me that I can't even get someone to show the product for over 2 weeks. It really is unbelievable. So that makes me want to ask you your perspective on the dangers of making the prospects wait so long.
Well, I think at the end of the day, what needs to happen is product access and this idea of the SE need to be decoupled. SEs can't purely own the product in order for them to scale. Like, as we know, and as an SE myself, we are resource constrained. We want to focus on the highest impact activity. So looping in SEs to every single demo, looping in SEs every time someone wants to see the product isn't the best way to scale out pre-sales. So figuring out ways to increase their span and increase that product knowledge across the organization is really important. So SEs can focus on being technical consultants and really quarterbacking those technical sales where they need to be involved.
It's a really good perspective. As we talk about this deceiving CTA and this process that happens behind the scenes while buyer expectations are evolving, you mentioned some of these things. So what can these businesses do to speed up their time to value, to meet prospects where they are?
There's a few things they can do. And one is offer product access earlier in the buying process. This has a few important benefits if you're able to offer that product access, whether that's an interactive demo, whether that's a trial, or whether that's some sort of mechanism to show folks what the product looks like. But once you get people informed around what the product and the offering does, the rest of the sales process goes infinitely faster. You can spend that first call talking and matching to their value points and to their pain points to your product, rather than explaining what your product does. And that aligns with the way that we're seeing buying behavior change. No longer are sales teams the harbinger of information around the demo and the product, that prospects come in educated around what the product does. And ideally, the more educated they are, the more educated sales teams can be and can match that earlier on. So it truly can be a consultative sell at the get-go rather than an extended education period, which was the traditional sales-led model.
I actually just posted on LinkedIn about the Gartner study about how the buying group is spending their time in key activities. According to Gartner, only 17% is spent with the actual suppliers, and 27% of the time is spent doing research behind the scenes. And that really means that when we as solutions consultants or solutions engineers are engaging with the buyer, their time is limited. They might only spend 5 or 6% of their time with us compared to other competitive solutions. So it is such an interesting time nowadays. And in this report, more than 80% of folks said their company's in a sales-led demo, and less than 20 to 20% are interested in this proof of concept and trial-based component. But those numbers are actually up significantly to anything that I've seen in the past. So why do you think prospects are asking for more POCs and more free trials?
Well, I think there's a few contributing reasons. One is a vast majority of the buying group are ages 25 to 30. So these users are experienced with consumer buying and they're used to that behavior. And so with that, having a try before you buy experience is a requisite, not a nice to have. And one of the things that we've seen is, as a vendor or a software provider, this is actually a big challenge for many teams. For some, a trial may come easy, and there's definitely benefits in the sense that customers can validate a solution works. You can get a technical win, and there's stickiness once they figure out the product works for them. But there's huge downsides, as we know, that it requires buy-in and time to actually effectively run that trial. And we've all seen the story of those prospects that ask to get hands-on, so desperately want to try things out, and then you give them the trial, and then crickets. You don't hear from them.
Nothing.
Yeah. And so you have these big cons around providing that product access. So I think for each business, it's important to explore, is your product really suited for a trial? And if not, what other alternatives can you offer to allow that hands-on access and meet that growing need to try before you buy?
I love that you just said, is the product suited for a trial in a POC? I'm going to reflect back to a personal story in a previous life. We had a sales team that came from a previous company that put every single deal in a POC or a pilot because the product was like very simple to stand up and the time to value was like very simple. 1 or 2 calls and you were like, all right, this product delivers value. And when they came over to the company that I was working at, it was a lot harder to set up. Our still sales process was like POC heavy, free trial heavy. And that was my job when I started, was manage these free trials. I was like, this is insane. I can't keep up. And so people were making assumptions of what the product could or couldn't do because it wasn't built with the first time user experience in mind. And that's what I tell people all the time is like, there's this difference in product-led growth is that products have to be purpose built with first time user experience in mind so that people have an easy experience. Because once they don't, like you said, sometimes crickets, they drop off. They only use it for a day. And we actually would use that to our advantage against more of the larger players in the space that were more cumbersome to set up. But I will say that an up and coming competitor started using that process to us because our product was so easy to stand up, so easy to get in there and to use. And we would start losing deals because of that. So like that perceived value, that quickness is really important. And again, this whole concept of purpose built, in my opinion, is so important because one of the things that you just mentioned was the age of the folks of buying. If you look at this survey, slightly more than 50% of the respondents were at companies under 500 employees. What does that mean for the future company? What does that mean years down the road? Is that these people don't want to talk to buyers. They want to get hands-on on the product. They want to try before they buy, like you mentioned. And I think that is this concept that is happening with the younger generation of buyers, and what that's going to mean for the profession a couple of years down the road is really interesting to me. Do you have a perspective there?
Yeah, those are all great points, James. And one of the ways that we've seen this sales-led model match with complex enterprise products is this term of product-led sales, where your product may not necessarily be suited for a free trial or freemium model because of its complexity. And there's definitely a need for these complex products. But that said, you can still employ a lot of key product-led tactics, like providing the product earlier in the buying cycle, making sure prospects have pricing information on the first call, giving them the upfront knowledge they need to make the right decision is an important tenet of product-led growth and product-led sales. And so what we've seen is companies take that product-led approach or have BDRs share interactive demos in outbound, have teams explore the product on the website before they jump in, and just allowing those folks to get hands-on and then be met with a seller or a frontline rep that is technical, that has the information around the product and can speak the language of the prospect is really the key to winning in today's environment where you have this hyper-competitive landscape with, like you mentioned, upstart competitors that may have a free trial or other options there.
It's really great points, Neil, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Channing Farrer, who's now CRO at Built-In, and I had co-written an article on PreSales Collective and Crunchbase around creating a PLG motion in your sales process. And what they were doing at HubSpot was actually in their transactional sale business, letting people get into the product right away and then having what they called an inside sales coach. It was essentially like almost like a technical SE come into the process and say, hey, how are you utilizing the product? Where are you finding value? And just technically validating them. And then the solutions consultant behind the scene was like providing all of the assets and resources. And once they were ready to buy, the salesperson just came in at the end of the sales cycle and did the commercials and signed the deal. And it's fascinating to me, especially in that transactional space. That might be the future. You talked a little bit about the technical seller's role changing. How do salespeople adapt to this new norm? What kind of perspective do they need to have to adopt to this new world of demos and new world of product-led growth?
Well, I think what we're seeing very strongly is that the sales and pre-sales teams merge very closely with post-sales, that no longer can you afford to essentially just be there and provide the demo and say good luck and make a decision, but rather having in-depth product knowledge, enabling your prospects to succeed within the product is becoming essential. And whether that's an actual trial or just enabling them to get hands-on with it is one of the big things that we've seen as the CSM, pre-sales, and AE roles all merge together into a kind of a hybrid product-oriented seller. I think that's one of the things that we've seen time and time again in the space.
Neil, it's really interesting perspective. And looking at the data as well, outside of the sales engineering organization, in this response, only 50% of AEs are actually doing demos and only 30% of customer success professionals are doing demos as well. How does that need to change?
I think this is one of the areas that the profession broadly in pre-sales can really win the most and make the biggest gains these next few years. We have a ownership of the product that typically lands in the hands of SEs. And traditionally, this is, SEs are the demo jockey. And that's really because other organizations haven't been able to upscale in the same way. What I think would be really effective for most teams is CSMs and AEs were able to deliver demos and have that product knowledge, maybe not to the same degree, but up to a higher degree than is the standard today. And the numbers that you shared, James, around AE demo delivery and CS demo delivery is a reflection of the stress that SE teams have, that they are put under a lot of the role of demoing and put under the product ownership because they don't have that knowledge there. So I think as far as like what tactically teams can do, there's a few things that pre-sales teams can do to effectively change this. So one is partner with product teams to provide product trainings across the organization. Having the ability to enable and expand that product access is critical. Another thing that pre-sales teams could do is work with AEs and CSMs to expand the product demo certification. Back at Oracle, that was an essential part of our training process, was to become demo certified. And enabling that across the CSM and AE orgs would go a long way to mitigating the number of inbound requests they receive. And then lastly, I think an important part is just building a product orientation inside your company. So what this could mean is enabling AEs and CSMs and SEs alike to provide that product feedback to product managers, to engineering teams, so that they can continue to iterate and have an ownership level over the product as they continue to grow. So it's not this scary thing, something they actually have a small role in building and contributing to.
I love the breakdown. Those are three really great takeaways. How have you and the Navattic team taken some of the findings of the report and actually brought it into your own organization, or have you?
So we do a few things that have helped. One is we allow prospects to experience our product instantly. So on our website, if you go to the homepage, you can test an interactive demo that's built on Navattic, and then conversely see the builder or Navattic app that was used to create that. So allowing people to understand exactly what our product does with little friction is one way that we've deployed this, and frankly seen a lot of customers deploy it. But one of the second ways, and frankly the most compelling ways that we've seen so far, is just reducing the friction in getting in touch with the Navattic team. So we use scheduling software to ensure that if you wanted to book time with the Navattic team, you could do so within that same day or the next day. And we've optimized calendars to make sure that that's available for buyers. So enabling people to get in touch with our team earlier on, to see the product earlier on, and to, in general, have that knowledge and understanding of what we offer has really helped not only expedite our sales process, but just build a good relationship with buyers and eventually customers. And the last thing that we do is once they get in touch with the team, we actually do a combination of a disco and demo. A lot of them have come through the website tour. They've seen what the product does. So we just show them a quick 7-minute demo on Navattic just to align on the exact product and map that to their priorities. So I think this is something that some teams could take advantage of if the product is right for it and the buying motion aligns.
I love that you guys have done that. And again, I love the product tours on the website. Obviously, that's what Navattic has specialized in. Optimizing your sales process is huge, but I need to dig on this blended disco demo. I will say one of the most highly debated posts that I've ever seen on LinkedIn was when I wrote about should you disco demo. You would have thought that I asked some question that was way different than should you do a disco demo. And I love that you actually said that you do a 7-minute demo. That's a tailored process. So why are you doing that? And how have you built that to be a successful part of your DNA?
Like you mentioned, James, there's a huge aversion within the industry of demoing on the first call. A lot of managers would potentially throw up in their mouths if they heard that we did that. But one of the things that we've seen, though, is that if you have a product that's designed for it, showing this on the first call builds buyer trust. It can get them excited about what the solution could offer. And it helps speed things along to not only show them what your product does, but also as a tool to map to their priorities. We focus a lot at Navattic on that discovery component, acting as true consultants to their needs. And so when you show them the product, it's less about here's the product and the demo that we're offering, but more of here are the priorities that you mentioned. Let's show how this component maps to that priority. And here's how sharing your product maps to this part of the sales process. So using it as a tool and a vehicle to expand on their priorities and see if it aligns with their needs is really the main functional tool. And just doing that earlier has been helpful.
I love that you said in that response and something earlier is you just said builds trust with buyers. And you also talked about providing pricing on first call. Those are putting the guardrails down. I've worked with plenty of sales leaders who historically be like, oh, we don't ever share pricing. We don't ever do demos on the first 5 calls. But like, you're right, that builds trust, it's speed, and it's personalization at the same time. So I really respect that the Navattic team is taking that approach within your own business. It's kind of drinking your own champagne.
That's right. We like to do it too.
Neil, I just want to say thank you for joining me today. I mean, it's been awesome working on this report. And I have to say that the end product looks fantastic. From PreSales Collective perspective, I wanted to do more of a static ebook, something that's a little bit more PDF and traditional and shareable. But when you and the team said, hey, we want to do something interactive and have it more visually appealing, I mean, I feel like the end product is beautiful. So really, thank you for coming up with that perspective, because I think, again, the end product looks amazing. But I'm curious, if we could do this again, is there anything that you would change about the report?
First off, it's been great to see the reaction from the broader pre-sales community on this. I think a lot of the topics are things that we were curious about, but really didn't have the data for. So providing that insight and data has been very special and valuable so far. As far as what we would change, allowing SE teams to see a more customized view into the sales org, including things like the industry, deal size, and company size, to effectively evaluate what are your peers doing rather than the whole SE world, which is pretty vast. And there's a lot of companies that may or may not reflect your company and your product. Allowing people to see their peers would be a valuable next iteration. But frankly, very excited to see the way it turned out so far. And thanks again to all the generous respondents who spent their time going through and providing the data that was utilized to compile this report.
Definitely agree, Neil. And I'm looking forward to our event on March 15th. We're going to do a webinar dissecting some of this data as well. And so if you're listening to this before March 15th, 2022, hopefully we see you there. If you're listening after, go to the YouTube and you can watch the video. So Neil, it's been great having you on the podcast. Again, really appreciate and respect what you guys are doing at Navattic, and great to see your journey alongside our growth and our journey as well.
Thanks, James. It's been great.
All right, PreSales Collective. I hope you enjoyed hearing Neil's perspective. As a pre-sales professional, I really do enjoy going through the data and looking at these reports and trying to tie together the results to buyer behavior. And really, that's what we talked about in this report, is not only the actual results, but how it applies to pre-sales teams, sales organizations, sales process, and really evolving buyer behaviors. One of the first things that Neil said that really caught my attention was the deceiving CTA. Sometimes it takes multiple calls before a buyer sees a demo. And if the demo is only part of the sales process, why do so many organizations hide it? And Neil talked about building trust with the buyer and speed to personalization. At Navattic, they show disco demo to start, and that's a very hot topic. Whatever your opinions are on the disco and the demo, it is interesting to hear that some of these up-and-coming companies are doing disco demo, are putting the product on their website, are letting people get into their process before they even talk to a salesperson. And really, the massive impact for pre-sales professionals is scaling pre-sales, allowing the solutions consultant to be more than just a demo jockey, but a true co-pilot in the sales process. As I mentioned at the end of the podcast, we're also going to be doing a webinar on this topic, so either join us live or watch the recording as we continue to dive into the data to understand the state of the product demo and how it is going to change our pre-sales profession. If you have any other thoughts or feedback on the report or on today's podcast, feel free to reach out to me on Slack. If something really resonated with you, please do share on social. Otherwise, PreSales Collective, I will see you next week.